all of a sudden, we could see the whole sphere, a great, gigantic blue ball covered with a white lace of clouds. It was spectacular.
You see the curve of the Earth, and you see that the atmosphere is so tiny and thin compared to this planet. And you understand that, wow, there's not that much there that's protecting us from the vacuum of space.
Here you are going 17,000 miles an hour over this incredibly beautiful planet. And here's this thin blue iridescent band, this little bitty thin atmosphere, everything that enables life to exist on this amazing ball of rock flying through space.
Our planet is changing. Since the late 19th century, the Earth has already warmed at least 1 degree Celsius. And we are seeing the devastating impacts. More severe weather, catastrophic events, and challenges to our lives and livelihoods. How much warmer our planet gets and how severe the impacts will be is up to us. The next decade is critical. We must change the course we're on in order to limit the rise in global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius. If we succeed, we will protect the most vulnerable, preserve ecosystems and wildlife, reduce our exposure to extreme heat and storms, create a healthier, more equitable world, and create new economic opportunities for all. The challenges are clear, but so are the solutions. The question is, how do we move fast enough to keep the world on track to limit the rise in global temperatures?
In my view, we've already waited too long to deal with this climate crisis. We can't wait any longer.
How do we make bigger, bolder changes than ever before?
Governments must deliver the transformational change our world needs and that people demand with much stronger ambition.
How do we create new economic opportunities and ensure a just transition?
Certainly, we face an unprecedented crisis, but also an unprecedented opportunity to build back better, a healthier, more productive, and more resilient society. We must step up to this challenge.
How do we create a more sustainable future for people and the planet?
I am emboldened by my faith that together, with compassion and commitment, we can all emerge from the present storm transformed.
We know we must, and we know the time to act is now. We must go faster and further than ever before.
To bring countries of the world together to raise ambition and meet this moment. That's the only way for the world to succeed together.
This is how we solve the climate crisis. Together.
Please welcome the President and the Vice President of the United States.
Your Excellencies, distinguished leaders, and esteemed colleagues from around the world. Welcome to this historic Leaders Summit on Climate. I want to thank you for being here and for your leadership. I have spoken with a number of you about the climate crisis. We have talked about the scarcity of water. We have talked about the need to build resilience. And we have talked about the importance of investing in clean technologies. Together, of course, we come from very different places, but we share this common concern and this common threat. Here in the United States, the storms hitting our Gulf Coast are worst every year. The wildfires in my home state of California have grown in intensity. And of course, no nation or region is immune. Whether it is Western Europe, where heat waves have made it very difficult to stay indoors while risking a health risk, or the Pacific Islands, where rising sea levels threaten to encroach on the land and homes of lifelong residents. Or in Central America, where last year two major hurricanes devastated entire communities. As a global community, it is imperative that we act quickly and together to confront this crisis. And this will require innovation and collaboration around the world. It will require the use of renewable energy and new technologies. And it will give each of our nations the opportunity to build healthier communities and stronger economies. Here we believe tackling climate change, improving communities and creating jobs can occur simultaneously. And we must recognize the importance, of course, of justice in the work that we do. The communities hardest hit by climate change are the same communities harmed by wealth and gender inequality, toxic air pollution, and so much more. This truth holds around the world. So I urge all of us to focus on these communities, including indigenous communities, and consider their insight and experience in our efforts moving forward. They are critical leaders in this fight. Friends, the health of our communities, the well-being of our workers, and the strength of our economies depend on what we do now. And I can think of no one more committed to achieving our collective goals than President Joe Biden. The president was one of the first members in the United States Congress to take on the issue of climate change. And on our first day in office, he led the fact that we would rejoin the Paris Agreement. And the president is just getting started as we work to tackle this crisis while creating clean energy jobs across our nation. It is now my great honor to introduce the President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Good morning to all our colleagues around the world leaders for taking part in the summit. I thank you. Your leadership on this issue is a statement to the people of your nation and the people of every nation, especially our young people that were ready to meet this moment. And meeting this moment is about more than preserving our planet. It's also about providing a better future for all of us. That's why when people talk about climate, I think jobs. Within our climate response lies an extraordinary engine of job creation and economic opportunity ready to be fired up. That's why I proposed a huge investment in American infrastructure and American innovation to tap the economic opportunity that climate change presents our workers and our communities, especially those too often that have left out and left behind. I want to build a critical infrastructure to produce and deploy clean technology, both those we can harness today and those that we'll invent tomorrow. I talk to the experts and I see the potential for a more prosperous and equitable future. The signs are unmistakable. The science is undeniable. But the cost of inaction keeps mounting. The United States isn't waiting. We are resolving to take action. Not only our federal government, but our cities and our states all across our country. Small businesses, large corporations, American workers in every field. I see an opportunity to create millions of good-paying, middle-class union jobs. I see line workers laying thousands of miles of transmission lines for a clean, modern, resilient grid. I see workers capping hundreds of thousands of abandoned oil and gas wells that need to be cleaned up and abandoned coal mines that need to be reclaimed, putting a stop to the methane leaks and protecting the health of our communities. I see auto workers building the next generation of electric vehicles and electricians installing nationwide for 500,000 charging stations along our highways. I see the engineers and the construction workers building new carbon capture and green hydrogen plants to forge cleaner steel and cement and produce clean power. I see farmers deploying cutting-edge tools to make soil of our heartland the next frontier in carbon innovation. By maintaining those investments and putting these people to work, the United States sets out on the road to cut greenhouse gases in half by the end of this decade. That's where we're headed as a nation. And that's what we can do if we take action to build an economy that's not only more prosperous, but healthier, fair, and cleaner for the entire planet. You know, these steps will set America on a path of net zero emissions economy by no later than 2050. But the truth is, America represents less than 15% of the world's emissions. No nation can solve this crisis on our own, as I know you all fully understand. All of us, and particularly those of us who represent the world's largest economies, we have to step up. You know, those that do take action and make bold investments in their people and clean energy future will win the good jobs of tomorrow and make their economies more resilient and more competitive. So let's run that race. Win more sustainable future than we have now. Overcome the existential crisis of our times. We know just how critically important that is, because scientists tell us that this is the decisive decade. This is the decade we must make decisions that will avoid the worst consequences of the climate crisis. We must try to keep the Earth's temperature to an increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. You know, the world beyond 1.5 degrees means more frequent and intense fires, floods, droughts, heat waves, and hurricanes, tearing through communities, ripping away lives and livelihoods. Increasingly, dire impacts to our public health. It's undeniable, you know, the idea of accelerating and punishing the reality that will come if we don't move. We can't resign ourselves to that future. We have to take action, all of us. And this summit is our first step on the road we'll travel together, God willing, all of us, to and through Glasgow this November and the UN Climate Change Conference. You know, to set our world on a path to secure, prosperous, and sustainable future. The health of communities throughout the world depends on it. The well-being of our workers depends on it. The strength of our economies depends on it. The countries that take decisive action now to create the industries of the future will be the ones that reap the economic benefits of the clean energy boom that's coming. You know, we're here at this summit to discuss how each of us, each country, can set higher climate ambitions that will in turn create good-paying jobs, advance innovative technologies, and help vulnerable countries adapt to climate impacts. We have to move. We have to move quickly to meet these challenges. The steps our countries take between now and Glasgow will set the world up for success. To protect livelihoods around the world and keep global warming at a maximum of 1.5 degrees Celsius. We must get on the path now in order to do that. If we do, we'll breathe easier, literally and figuratively. We'll create good jobs here at home for millions of Americans and lay a strong foundation for growth for the future. And that can be your goal as well. This is a moral imperative, an economic imperative, a moment of peril, but also a moment of extraordinary possibilities. Time is short, but I believe we can do this. And I believe that we will do this. Thank you for being part of this summit. Thank you for the communities that you and the commitments you have made and the communities you're from. God bless you all. And I look forward to progress that we can make together today and beyond. We really have no choice. We have to get this done.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We are so grateful to have all of you with us today. As President Biden and Vice President Harris have made clear, this administration intends to do more than any in U.S. history to meet the climate crisis. What the United States can do at home can make a significant contribution toward keeping the Earth's warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's why we're raising our ambitions, as the President described, and we will meet the new targets we set. But of course, no country can overcome this existential threat alone. We're in this together. And what each of our nations does, or does not do, will not only impact people of our own country, but people everywhere. Many of us, perhaps all of us, feel a strong sense of urgency. That's why we're here. We hope that will translate into making the progress necessary during this critical year and over this decisive decade. The consequences of falling short are clear. Every one of our countries is already experiencing the impact of climate change, and they'll only get worse. More frequent and more intense storms, longer dry spells, bigger floods, more people displaced, more pollution, higher health costs. And climate change can drive the spread of disease, food insecurity, mass migration, and conflict. All of these consequences are hitting underserved and marginalized communities in our countries the hardest. And some countries are experiencing much more severe impacts than others, something we must acknowledge and address. But, as the President said, it would be a mistake to think about climate only through the prism of threats. As we take concrete actions to reduce emissions and prepare for the unavoidable impacts of climate change, we have an opportunity to create sustainable, good-paying jobs, to promote not only greater growth, but greater equity, and to provide sustainable, reliable, affordable access to energy to more people, which is crucial to every aspect of human development. So we're rooting for every country, every business, every community around the world to succeed in this effort. In that spirit, as other countries strive to meet and raise their climate targets, the United States will mobilize resources, institutional knowledge, and technical expertise from across our government, the private sector, civil society, and research universities to help. We want every country here to know we want to work with you to save our planet, and we're all committed to finding every possible avenue of cooperation on climate. If we work together, we can do more than just address this crisis. We can turn it into an opportunity to improve our societies and deliver for people worldwide. And we can lay the foundation for cooperation on other shared challenges. There are many issues on which we don't all see eye to eye. This isn't one of them. No matter what country we're from, we know the world that we want to pass on to our children and our grandchildren. I can think of no better or more urgent cause to bring us together. It's now my honor to call on His Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres.
Earth. Thank you, President Biden, for bringing us together to focus on the existential threat of climate change. You have started this summit by walking the talk, and I applaud the commitment of the United States to cut greenhouse gas emissions 50 to 52% below 25 levels by 2030. Mother Nature is not waiting. The past decade was the hottest on record. Dangerous greenhouse gases are at levels not seen in 3 million years. Global temperature has already risen 1.2 degrees Celsius, racing towards the threshold of catastrophe. Meanwhile, we see ever-rising sea levels, scorching temperatures, devastating tropical cyclones, and epic wildfires. We need a green planet, but the world is on red alert. We are at the verge of the abyss. We must make sure the next step is in the right direction. Leaders everywhere must take action. First, by building a global coalition for net zero emissions by mid-century, every country, every region, every city, every company, and every industry. Second, by making this a decade of transformation. All countries, starting with major emitters, should submit new and more ambitious nationally determined contributions for mitigation, adaptation, and finance, laying out actions and policies for the next 10 years aligned with the 2050 net zero pathway. Third, we need to translate those commitments into concrete, immediate action. So far, only 18 to 24% of pandemic recovery spending is expected to contribute to mitigating emissions, reducing air pollution, or strengthening natural capital. The trillions of dollars needed for COVID-19 recovery is money we are borrowing from future generations. We cannot use these resources to lock in policies that burden them with a mountain of debt on a broken planet. We must put a price on carbon, shifting taxation from income to carbon, and subsidies for fossil fuels. Ramp up investments in renewable energy and green infrastructure. Stop the financing of coal and the building of new coal power plants, and phase out coal by 2030 in the wealthiest countries and by 2040 everywhere else. Ensure a just transition for affected people and communities. Fourth, to build a truly global net zero coalition, we need a breakthrough on finance and adaptation. And this is critical for trust and collective action. Donors and multilateral national development banks must move from 20 to 50% in all climate flows to resilience and adaptation. Before the United Nations Climate Conference in November in Glasgow, we need concrete proposals that need access to greater finance and technological support for the most vulnerable countries. Developed states must deliver on public climate finance, including the long-promised $100 billion for climate action in developing countries at the G7 summit in June. Excellencies, young people are pushing their elders to do what is right. Women are on the front lines. More than 700 cities have committed to net zero by 2050, and I'm encouraged by the mobilization of the financial sector around the Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero, representing $70 trillion of assets. And I call on all members to align as soon as possible behind the gold standard on credibility and ambition established by the Asset Owners Alliance that I convened. Let us now mobilize political leadership to move ahead together to overcome climate change, end our war on nature, and build lives of dignity and prosperity for all. And I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. It's now my honor to call on the President of the People's Republic of China, His Excellency Xi Jinping.
尊敬的拜登总统，尊敬的各位同事，很高兴应邀出席领导人气候峰会。气候变化给人类生存和发展人与自然
needs to come together to foster a community of life for man and nature. First, we must be committed to harmony between man and nature. All things that grow live in harmony and benefit from the nourishment of nature. Mother Nature has nourished us, and we must treat nature as our root. Respect it, protect it, and follow its laws. We should protect nature and preserve the environment like we protect our eyes. Second, we must be committed to green development. Green mountains are gold mountains. To protect the environment is to protect productivity, and to improve the environment is to boost productivity. The truth is as simple as that. We need to make sure that a sound environment is there to buttress sustainable economic and social development worldwide. Third, we must be committed to systemic governance. Mountains, rivers, forests, as well as farmlands, lakes, grasslands, and deserts all make indivisible parts of the ecosystem. We need to properly balance all elements and aspects of nature and maintain overall balance in the ecosystem. Fourth, we must be committed to a people-centered approach. The environment concerns the well-being of people in all countries. We need to take into full account people's longing for a better life and good environment, as well as our responsibility for future generations. We need to deliver social equity and justice in the cause of green transition and increase people's sense of benefit, happiness, and security. Fifth, we must be committed to multilateralism. We need to work on the basis of international law, follow the principle of equity and justice, and focus on effective actions. We need to uphold the UN-centered international system, comply with the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and its Paris Agreement, and strive to deliver the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Sixth, we must be committed to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. The principle of common but differentiated responsibilities is the cornerstone of global climate governance. We need to give full recognition to developing countries' contribution to climate action and accommodate their particular difficulties and concerns. Developed countries need to increase climate ambition and action and make concrete efforts to help developing countries accelerate the transition to green and low-carbon development. Not long ago, the Chinese and US sides released a joint statement addressing the climate crisis. China looks forward to working with the international community, including the United States, to jointly advance global environmental governance. Colleagues, the Chinese civilization has always valued harmony between man and nature. It has been our constant pursuit that man and nature could live in harmony with each other. China will follow the thought on ecological civilization and implement the new development philosophy. We will continue to prioritize ecological conservation and pursue a green and low-carbon path to development. China will strive to peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. China has committed to move from carbon peak to carbon neutrality in a much shorter time span than what might take many developed countries, and that requires extraordinarily hard efforts from China. Support is being given to encourage peaking pioneers from localities, sectors, and companies. We will strictly control coal-fired power generation projects. We will strictly limit the increase in coal consumption over the 14th five-year plan period and phase it down in the 15th five-year plan period. China will host COP15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity and support COP26 of the UNFCCC in achieving positive outcomes. China will promote joint efforts to build a green Belt and Road to benefit the people of all countries. I am confident that as long as we unite in our purposes and efforts, we will rise above the global climate and environment challenges and leave a clean and beautiful world to future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I now call upon the Prime Minister of the Republic of India, His Excellency Narendra Modi.
Your Excellency, President Biden, colleagues, my fellow citizens of this planet, Namaskar. I would like to thank President Biden for taking this initiative. Humanity is battling a global pandemic right now. And this event is a timely reminder that the grave threat of climate change had not disappeared. In fact, climate change is a lived reality for millions around the world. Their lives and livelihoods are already facing its adverse consequences. Friends, for humanity to combat climate change, concrete action is needed. We need such action at a high speed, on a large scale, and with a global scope. We in India are doing our part. Our ambitious renewable energy target of 450 gigawatts by 2030 shows our commitment. Despite our development challenges, we have taken many bold steps on clean energy, energy efficiency, afforestation, and biodiversity. That is why we are among the few countries whose NDCs are 2 degrees Celsius compatible. We have also encouraged global initiatives like International Solar Alliance, LEAD IT, and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Friends, as a climate responsible developing country, India welcomes partners to create templates of sustainable development in India. This can also help other developing countries who need affordable access to green finance and clean technologies. That is why President Biden and I are launching the India-US Climate and Clean Energy Agenda 2030 partnership. Together, we will help mobilize investments, demonstrate clean technologies, and enable green collaborations. Friends, today, as we discuss global climate action, I want to leave one thought with you. India's per capita carbon footprint is 60% lower than the global average. It is because of our lifestyle is still rooted in sustainable traditional practices. So today, I want to emphasize the importance of lifestyle change in climate action. Sustainable lifestyles and guiding philosophy of back to basic must be an important pillar of our economic strategy for the post-COVID era. Friends, I recall the words of the great Indian monk, Swami Vivekananda. He called on us to arise, awake, and stop not until the goal is reached. Let us make this decade of action against climate change. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. And now, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the Right Honourable Boris Johnson. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Tony, and Your Excellencies, colleagues, friends. I'd like to begin by thanking President Biden very much for bringing us all together in the way that he has, and for setting out the problem in the eloquent way that he did at the beginning, and of course for returning the United States to the front rank of the fight against climate change. And I'm really thrilled by the game-changing announcement that Joe Biden has just made. And I'm very proud that the UK is doing the same. We were the first country to pass legislation for net zero. We have the biggest offshore wind capacity still, I think, of any country in the world, the Saudi Arabia of wind, as I never tire of saying. We're halfway to net zero. We have carbon emissions lower than at any point since the 19th century. We're ending support for fossil fuels overseas and doubling our international climate finance. And we're actually speeding up because we see the obligation, as colleagues have just pointed out, for developed countries to do more. We're legislating to deliver 78% of the reductions needed to reach that goal by 2035. And as host of COP26, we want to see similar ambitions around the world. And we're working with everybody, from the smallest nations to the biggest emitters, to secure commitments that will keep change to within 1.5 degrees. And I think we can do it. And to do it, We need the scientists and all of our countries to work together to produce the technological solutions that humanity is going to need, whether it's carbon capture and storage, or solving the problems of cheap hydrogen delivery, or getting to jet zero flying, getting to net zero flying, making sure that we can really roll out EVs properly, making sure that our homes stop emitting such prodigious quantities of CO2, moving to sustainable domestic living. We can do this together across the world. And it's going to mean the richest nations coming together and exceeding the $100 billion commitment that they already made in 2009. I stress how important that is. Plus, and I think what President Xi had to say about the harmony with nature was absolutely vital. If we're going to tackle climate change sustainably, we have to deal with the disaster of habitat loss and species loss across our planet. And we want to see more examples of governments and private industry working hand in hand, as with the newly launched LEAF Coalition to reduce deforestation and the multi-trillion-dollar Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero. And to do these things, we've got to be constantly original and optimistic about new technology and new solutions, whether that's super resistant crops that are super resistant to drought, or more accurate weather forecasts like those we hope to see from the UK's new Met Office £1.2 billion supercomputer that we're investing in. I'm not saying any of this is going to be easy, and there is obviously going to be a political challenge. And I think it's very important to go back to the original words of President Biden, because it's vital for all of us to show that this is not all about some expensive, politically correct green act of bunny hugging, or however you want to put it. I'm not wrong with bunny hugging, but you know what I'm driving at, friends and colleagues. This is about growth and jobs, and I think the president was absolutely right to stress that. And I want to leave you with the thought that we can build back better from this pandemic by building back greener. And don't forget that the UK has been able to cut our own CO2 emissions by about 42% on 1990 levels, and we've seen our economy grow by 73%. You can do both at once. Cake, have, eat is my message to you. So let's work together on this. Let's go to Kunming in October and then Glasgow in November, armed with ambitious targets and the plans required to meet them. And let's use this extraordinary moment and the incredible technology that we're working on to make this decade the moment of decisive change in the fight against climate change. And let's do it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. And now the Prime Minister of Japan, His Excellency Yoshihide Suga. Mr. Prime Minister.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Joe, I am pleased to meet with you again. I would like to reiterate my deepest gratitude for your hospitality at the White House just a week ago. I would also like to take this opportunity to commend your leadership for holding this important summit. Extreme weather events such as torrential rains, forest fires, and heavy snowfalls are witnessed worldwide in recent years, and climate change is said to be a major cause of such events. Responding to climate change and progressing decarbonization is hence an imminent challenge which the whole of humankind should aim to solve. At the same time, our response to climate change is no longer a constraint on our economy. Rather, it will be the driving force of the long-term dynamic growth of not only Japan, but also the whole world. With this vision in mind, in the fall of last year, I immediately Immediately after assuming my office as Prime Minister, I declared that Japan will aim for net zero by 2050. We will take a big step toward the resolution of this global issue. Japan aims to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 46% in the fiscal year 2030 compared to the fiscal year 2013 as an ambitious target which is aligned with the long-term goal of net zero by 2050. Furthermore, Japan will continue strenuous efforts in its challenge to meet the lofty goal of cutting its emission by 50%. Such a goal of 46% in reductions would mean that Japan will raise our current target by more than 70%, and it will certainly not be an easy task. However, by defining a top-level ambitious target appropriate for the next growth strategy of the nation which underpins global manufacturing, Japan is ready to demonstrate its leadership for worldwide decarbonization. From now on, we will accelerate our deliberations for establishing concrete measures toward achieving the target. Japan, in order to create a virtuous cycle of the economy and the environment and to grow strongly towards our ambitious goal for 2030, will work to maximize the utilization of decarbonized power sources such as renewable energy and take incentive measures sufficient for inducing investment by companies. The national and subnational governments of Japan will work together to aim for achieving decarbonization in more than 100 subnational regions across the country by 2030. Japan will also work for the realization of innovation that will enhance production and secure sustainability in food, agriculture, and forestry sectors. Furthermore, Japan will advance the transition to a circular economy, thereby creating new industries and employment. Japan will continue its unceasing efforts toward 2030 and 2050.
Global decarbonization is what cannot be achieved by the efforts of one country alone. It is a challenge that requires the whole international community to be united as one. We can create global waves for climate change measures with ambitious targets presented and implemented by countries attending the summit today who are responsible for around 80% of global emissions, thereby overwhelming the whole world with our waves. Joe, on the occasion of my recent visit to the United States last week, I had the pleasure to confirm with you our commitment to lead the world global decarbonization efforts. In more concrete terms, Joe and I launched Japan-U.S. Climate Partnership on Ambition, Decarbonization, and Clean Energy. Based on this partnership, Japan and the United States will work to promote worldwide decarbonization and continue cooperation in each area of the implementation of the Paris Agreement, clean energy technologies and innovation, and accelerating transition of developing countries, including Indo-Pacific countries, to a decarbonized society. In parallel to such bilateral efforts, Japan has provided public and private climate finance amounting to approximately 1.3 trillion Japanese yen, which is equivalent to approximately $11.8 billion. We announced that we will make contributions of up to $3 billion to the Green Climate Fund. We will support the global transition to decarbonization by maximizing the use of Japan's leading technologies in areas such as energy efficiency, hydrogen, and CCS, carbon capture and storage. In the area of adaptation, Japan will promote international cooperation to address the impacts hitting vulnerable states in the world. No other time than now does international society require further solidarity for the realization of a decarbonized society. Japan, as a nation that puts utmost importance on multilateral approaches, is determined to take the lead in solving the challenge of climate change for the whole of humankind by cooperating with each country and international organizations for the coming months leading up to COP26 and beyond. Thank you for your attention.
Pleasure to call upon the Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. I want to begin by thanking President Biden for hosting this summit. Mr. President, thank you for your leadership on addressing the climate crisis and on other shared priorities, from the fight against COVID-19 to building a strong middle class. I'm encouraged to see so many countries coming together today to fight climate change. It's the only way to overcome the challenges people face in every part of our world. That's why it's also vital that we all work together to strengthen respect for international law, reaffirm our collective commitment to human rights, and stand up for people who face persecution abroad. Our collective success depends on finding a better path, not only to a more sustainable future, but to shared peace and prosperity for everyone. Notre priorité continue d'être notre lutte.
Our priority continues to be combating COVID-19. We rely on science to save lives and develop vaccines, but we must also listen to climate science, which tells us that we are facing an existential threat.
Against a polluted planet. When Canadians elected us 5 years ago, our emissions were projected to keep rising through 2030. But with hard work and a solid plan, Canada is now on track to blow past our old target of 30% reduction below 2005 levels. Last December, we strengthened our climate plan to reduce more emissions, including with a world-leading price on pollution. This week, we made additional investments in the budget, and today, Canada is in a position to raise our climate ambition once again. Our new climate target for 2030 is to reduce our 2005 emission levels by 40 to 45%. And we will continually strengthen our plan and take even more actions on our journey to net zero by 2050. Seules les politiques climatiques sérieuses donnent des résultats.
Only bold climate policies lead to bold results. For example, you can no longer pollute in Canada for free. In 2030, our carbon price will reach $170 per ton.
Climate ambition and economic ambition go together. That's why we're investing in public transit, clean energy, retrofitting homes, and decarbonizing industry like steel, cement, and aluminum to secure our clean industrial advantage. We're also banning harmful single-use plastics, protecting 30% of our oceans and land, and planting 2 billion trees. And we will make it law to respect our new 2030 target and achieve net zero emissions by 2050. That's our local story. And it could be part of a global success story too. In Canada, we've worked hard to get to over 80% emissions-free electricity, and we're not going to stop until we get to 100%. If major economies in the room were to follow Canada's lead and adopt a rising price on pollution and commit to phase out coal plants, we would accelerate our global path for a safe, prosperous net zero future. Le Canada est un pays qui produit et exporte de l'énergie.
Canada is a country that produces and exports energy. And so I understand that this will not be easy. We are all facing different realities, but if all governments and Indigenous peoples and different sectors can all come together and work together, then we should be able to find solutions and create real change. And that is why we're here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. I now call upon the Prime Minister of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina. Madam Prime Minister.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Honorable President Joe Biden, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Excellencies, Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I thank President Biden for convening the summit and inviting me to speak to this August gathering. Bangladesh deeply appreciates the United States' return to the Paris Climate Agreement and is keen to engage with the international community. Excellencies, despite being a climate vulnerable country with resource constraints, Bangladesh has emerged as a global leader on adaptation and mitigation. Every year, we are spending on an average $5 billion US, about 2.5% of our GDP, on climate adaptation and resilience building measures. The 1.1 million forcefully displaced Rohingyas from Myanmar, whom we have sheltered, worsened our vulnerability. Bangladesh is pursuing a low-carbon development path to raise our national determined contribution, NDC, and adaptation ambition. We have included new sectors in addition to the existing energy, industry, and transport sectors in the mitigation process. We are planning to submit a quantified, ambitious NDC by June 2021. Excellencies, Bangladesh is observing Mujib Year, marking the birth centenary of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. We are planting 30 million saplings nationwide and adopted Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan to achieve low-carbon economic growth. As the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum and B20, Bangladesh's key focus is to uphold the interest of the climate vulnerable countries. We are hosting the South Asian Regional Office of the Global Center on Adaptation, which is promoting locally led adaptation solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us that global crises can only be addressed through a strong collective response. As such, as a responsible member state of the COP and as the chair of CBA, I would like to make few suggestions. Number one, immediate and ambitious action plan by developed countries to reduce their carbon emissions to keep the global temperature rise at 1.5 degrees Celsius. The developing nations should also focus on mitigation measures. Number two, ensuring the annual target of $100 billion US, which should be balanced 50-50 between adaptation and mitigation with special attention to the vulnerable countries while pursuing loss and damage. Number three, major economies, international financial institutions, and private sectors should come forward for concessional climate financing as well as innovation. And number four, focus is needed on green economy and carbon neutral technologies with provision to technology transfer among nations. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Madam Prime Minister. It's now a pleasure to call upon the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, Her Excellency Angela Merkel. Madam Chancellor.
Ja, sehr geehrter Herr Präsident, lieber Joe Biden.
Mr. President, dear Joe Biden, dear colleagues, I'm delighted to see that the United States is back to work together with us in climate politics, because there can be no doubt about the world needing your contribution if we really want to fulfill our ambitious goals. And the national contribution of the United States for 2030 is a clear illustration of your ambitions. That is a very clear and important message to the international community. Thank you for this, and thank you for organizing this summit. This is a Herculean task, because this is nothing short of a complete transformation, a complete change of the way we do business, the way we work. Germany, as you know, has already reduced its emissions by 40 compared to 2019 and the European
Union will be climate neutral by 2050, and we want to at least have 55% less emissions by 2030 compared to 1990. At the beginning of this week, the EU adopted an agreement that sets this target as a binding one into law, and we as Germany will obviously give our contribution. We have actually described a policy that sets out a pathway towards climate neutrality. We think that CO2 pricing is the right way forward. That is why we have introduced a national emissions trading for transport and heating, and thus so far for sectors that have not been covered by EU emissions trading. Coal has been for us a very important resource, but by the latest, and I heard Antonio Guterres on that, by the very latest, by 2038, we will phase out coal electrification, and we will invest further into renewables. Already last year, we have produced electricity 46% of our electricity from renewables, and we want to increase that. The necessary economic recovery after the pandemic is something that we also want to use for innovation, for technology. So we invest in renewables instead of in coal. And we also see to it that the loss of biodiversity all over the world is stopped. We think that we need to place 30% of the global land and marine surface under protection. We need primarily solidarity with the developing countries. As industrialized countries, we have committed ourselves to mobilize by 2020 an annual amount of $100 billion, and this is to be followed up by an extension until at the very least 2025. Germany has doubled its financing by 2022, 4 billion euros per year, and we're going to continue to contribute our fair share to this. With all of these measures, we, I think, underline very clearly that we are interested in the success of COP26 in Glasgow this year, and obviously also COP15 in Kunming, where we're talking about preserving biodiversity. And in line with its tradition, Germany is going to host, together with the United Kingdom, the 12th Petersburg Climate Dialogue this year, and we're going to prepare Glasgow. Thus, we are an active member, and we're very much looking forward to cooperating with all of you.
Thank you very much, Chancellor Merkel. It's now a pleasure to call upon the President of the French Republic, His Excellency Emmanuel Macron. Monsieur le Président.
Mesdames et messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement.
Thank you.
Mesdames et messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Monsieur le Président des États-Unis, cher Joe Biden, merci avant toute chose de nous avoir réunis aujourd'hui. Je veux saluer l'annonce de la contribution américaine. C'est un choix historique sur le chemin qui nous mène vers Glasgow. Je veux saisir cette occasion pour saluer aussi votre décision de rejoindre l'amendement de Kigali pour la réduction des gaz HFC. Il y a quelques jours, avec Madame la chancelière Merkel, nous nous sommes entretenus avec le président Xi Jinping, qui s'est engagé aussi en ce sens. Il conviendra aussi que tous ensemble, nous engagions le combat pour réduire les émissions de méthane. Nous avançons. Un seul objectif dans les prochaines semaines et les prochains mois,
I now turn the floor to the President of the Russian Federation, His Excellency Vladimir Putin.
Précis, mesurable, vérifiable. Au fond, 2030 est le nouveau 2050. C'est ce plan que l'Union européenne a mis sur la table en décembre, traduite dans une loi climat européenne, avec le Green Deal pour lui donner corps. À nous donc maintenant de...
The floor is now to the President of the Russian Federation, Mr. Vladimir Putin. Mr. President. They may be getting Macron because that was a tape of Macron.
Mr. President, colleagues, ladies, gentlemen, our discussion today demonstrates how deeply we all share the concern with regard to global climate change, and how much we're all interested in redoubling the international effort to address this issue. Whether this effort proves successful will largely determine the future of our planet, the development prospects of each country, as well as the well-being and quality of life of our citizens. We believe there is a solid legal framework for international collaboration in controlling and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, namely the universal agreements reached under the UN auspices. I'd like to stress that Russia treats its international commitments with the utmost responsibility in this sphere, and I refer in particular to the implementation of the UNFCCC, the Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement. We take active effort in Russia to build modern legislation that allows both controlling carbon emissions and creating incentives for their reduction. Yesterday, I presented my annual address to the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation, and among our social and economic priorities, I listed the task of significantly reducing the net accumulated emissions in our country by 2050. I'm confident that despite Russia's size, its geography, climate, and economic structure, this task is achievable. We shouldn't forget, as colleagues have already pointed out throughout this summit, recollecting the 90s, as compared to the 1990 level, Russia has reduced its greenhouse gas emissions to a greater extent than many other countries. Our emissions have halved, dropping from 3.1 billion tons to 1.6 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. This has become possible because of a fundamental restructuring of our industry and energy that has been underway for the last 2 decades. As a result, as of now, 45% of our energy mix is accounted for by low-emission energy sources, including nuclear generation. And, as is well known, the greenhouse gas emissions from nuclear power plants stand at almost zero throughout all of the life cycle of nuclear power plants. We intend to further improve our capacities for using associated petroleum gas and carry out a large-scale campaign for environmental modernization and greater energy efficiency across all economic sectors to ensure carbon capture, storage, and use from all sources. We're also building an infrastructure for producing hydrogen to be used both as a fuel and an energy source. I'd like to take note in that regard that Russia has launched a pilot project in Sakhalin region for creating a carbon pricing system and a mechanism for carbon trading. This project will allow this Russian region to become carbon neutral as soon as by 2025. It is no secret that the conditions that facilitated global warming and associated problems go way back. But what kind of comprehensive solutions to these issues can we see today? First, carbon dioxide can stay in the atmosphere for hundreds of years. So it's not enough to tackle the issue of new emissions. It is also important to take up the task of absorbing the CO2 that has accumulated in the atmosphere. Let me say that without exaggeration, Russia makes a gigantic contribution to absorbing global emissions, both ours and from elsewhere, owing to the great absorption capacities of our ecosystems that are estimated at around 2.5 billion tons of CO2 equivalent per annum. Second, we need to take into account each and every factor contributing to global warming. To cite an example, methane accounts for 20% of all anthropogenic emissions, and the greenhouse effect of a single ton of methane is 25 to 28 times stronger than that of a ton of CO2. So supposing we can halve methane emissions in the next 3 decades, experts project global temperatures to decrease by 2050 by 0.18 degrees centigrade, which incidentally makes up to 45% of the difference between the current temperatures and the objectives under the Paris Agreement. In this regard, it would be imperative to foster a broad and efficient international cooperation in calculating and monitoring all harmful emissions into the atmosphere. We invite all those interested countries to join collaborative scientific research, to jointly invest in climate projects that can make a difference in real life, and to actively pursue new low-carbon technologies for mitigation and adaptation. Third, I'm convinced that the fight for preserving our climate should certainly unite the efforts of the international community as a whole. Russia is willing to propose a whole range of joint projects and to consider potential benefits even for foreign companies that would like to invest in clean technologies, including in our countries. And lastly, global development should not only be green, it should also be sustainable in every sense of the word. And this applies to all countries without exception. Accordingly, this development should go hand in hand with progress on such important tracks as fighting poverty and bridging development gaps between countries. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate that Russia is genuinely interested in galvanizing international cooperation so as to look further for effective solutions to climate change, as well as to all other vital global challenges. Essentially, it's the end goal of our today's video summit too. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We had some technical difficulties, so we want to return the floor to the President of France, Emmanuel Macron.
Mesdames et messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Monsieur le Président des États-Unis, cher Joe Biden, merci avant toute chose de nous avoir réunis aujourd'hui. Je veux saluer l'annonce de la contribution américaine. C'est un choix historique sur le chemin qui nous mène vers Glasgow. Je veux saisir cette occasion pour saluer aussi votre décision de rejoindre l'amendement de Kigali pour la réduction des gaz HFC. Il y a quelques jours, avec Madame la chancelière Merkel, nous nous sommes entretenus avec le président Xi Jinping qui s'est engagé aussi en ce sens. Il conviendra aussi que tous ensemble, nous engagions le combat pour réduire les émissions de méthane.
So methane emissions. We are making progress. There is only one goal for the coming weeks and months: to move more quickly. We need to move more quickly to implement the commitments for 2030. A plan of action that is clear, measurable, and verifiable. Basically, 2030 is the new 2050. It is this plan that the European Union put forward in December with its European Green Deal. It is therefore up to us to use all the levers available to us: innovation, transformation, regulation. Let's move more quickly on our cooperation on innovation and disruptive technologies, which will enable us to rise to the challenge and drive down our costs, just as you have done in the areas of solar energy or batteries. This will be at the core of the European action, especially in the months ahead. A second lever: we need to completely transform our financial system. We have started to do this with the Network for Greening the Financial System, the NGFS, which the Fed has just joined, which is something I welcome. With the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFS, We have also taken, all of us together in these last several years, an extensive and transformative initiative. The One Planet Initiative has brought together sovereign funds, asset managers, and private equity so that everyone can use the same methodology. These initiatives have become models for the future and are changing global finance. France will shoulder all of its responsibilities in the coming months in order to go even further on the issue of this finance for climate. Taking action for the climate means regulating and regulating at an international level. If we don't set a price for carbon, there will be no transition. Therefore, we need to factor the environment in the costs of investment, in our regional investment, in our regional markets, and in our trade relations. There can be no credible and sustainable environmental action if there's no social and climate justice. To succeed collectively, we need to move much more quickly to improve climate justice. That is the meaning behind the action we have taken with India and the International Solar Alliance. That is also why we are holding the Summit on the Financing of African Economies in Paris on May 18. It is now up to us to establish a stronger mandate for our public banks in order to achieve net zero carbon emissions.
Le combat est le même, c'est un combat pour la planète.
Is the same. The Green Wall Accelerator shows that Africa can contribute to tackling the causes and effects of climate change, while boosting food security and job opportunities for its young people. All of these agendas are connected. It is up to us to take action. Thank you again, Joe. It is up to us to take action for our generations and the generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Macron. We turn now to the President of the Republic of Korea. Mr. President, President Moon, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. His Excellency President Biden, Your Excellencies. This evening on Earth Day, the Korean people turned their lights off for 10 minutes and heeded the whispers of the earth. I hope that the warm support of Koreans will reach out to all the countries that are in the fight against climate change together. As we embark on the implementation of the Paris Agreement this year, President Biden has exerted global leadership by rejoining the Paris Agreement and hosting this Leaders Summit on Climate. I express my deepest respect to the President and his administration for all their hard work. Your Excellencies, the people of Korea, amidst the challenges posed by COVID-19 last year, set the goal of carbon neutrality by 2050 and are now working to put together detailed scenarios. Today, on behalf of the Korean people, I am deeply pleased to make two pledges for achieving carbon neutrality. First, the Republic of Korea will further raise our nationally determined contribution for 2030 and submit it to the United Nations within this year. Last year, we replaced our previous reduction target based on BAU with an absolute target of cutting 24.4% from 2017 emissions level, making it our first upward adjustment. Now, in a strong aspiration to reach net zero emissions by 2050, we hope to enhance our NDC once again. Korea reached peak greenhouse gas emissions in 2018. And in the ensuing two-year period from 2019 to 2020, reduced more than 10% of emissions from 2018 level. Second, Korea will end all public financing for new overseas coal-fired power plants. Since the launch of my government, Korea has stopped issuing permits for building new domestic coal power plants, shut down 10 aged units earlier than scheduled, and as a result, drastically reduced its reliance on coal for power generation. Instead, we're swiftly ramping up the production of renewable energy, such as solar and wind power. To become carbon neutral, it is imperative for the world to scale down coal-fired power plants. Yet, developing countries that will struggle due to their heavy dependence on coal should be given due consideration and access to proper support. On the domestic front as well, we need countermeasures for addressing the negative impacts to related industries, businesses, and jobs, among others. With a view to promoting investment in renewable energy facilities, both in and outside Korea, we will actively seek to scale up green finance. In coming May, the second P4G summit will be held in Seoul. Member countries, civil society, industries, as well as other diverse partners will come together to accelerate the vision of carbon neutrality for humanity. As a host, Korea will exert every effort to prepare for the summit that inspires an actionable vision and stronger cooperation. I ask for your keen interest and participation so that the second P4G summit becomes a stepping stone to a successful COP26 this coming November. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. We turn the floor now to the President of the Republic of Indonesia, Joko Widodo. Mr. President, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Excellency President Biden, for hosting this summit. The impact of climate change stands directly before us. COVID-19 and the global recession further complicate these challenges. In this regard, allow me to share 3 reflections. First, Indonesia is serious in tackling climate change and calls upon the world to take concrete actions, to lead by example. As the largest archipelagic country and home to tropical forests, addressing climate change is Indonesia's national interest. Through policies, empowerment, and law enforcement, the rate of deforestation in Indonesia is at its lowest in the last 20 years. The moratorium on natural forest and peatland conversion has covered 66 million hectares, larger than the size of the UK and Norway combined. Forest fires have fallen by 82%, at a time when some regions in the Americas, Australia, and Europe experienced the largest increase. Second, we must advance green development for a better world. Indonesia has updated its NDC to enhance the capacity of climate adaptation and resilience. We welcome the upcoming UNFCCC COP26 in the UK and look forward to an implementable and balanced outcome. We welcome several countries' target to achieve net zero emission by 2050. However, to ensure its credibility, such commitment should be implemented based on the 2030 NDC commitments. Developing countries will implement similar ambitions. If developed countries' commitments are credible, accompanied by concrete support, the fulfillment of commitments and support by developed countries are indeed a necessity. Third, to achieve the targets of the Paris Agreement and other shared agenda, global partnership must be strengthened, must build understanding and strategies to reach net zero emissions and towards UNFCCC COP26 Glasgow. Indonesia is accelerating its pilot projects for net zero emission, including in the construction of Indonesia Green Industrial Park, covering an area of 12,500 hectares in North Kalimantan, which will become the largest in the world. We are rehabilitating 620,000 hectares of mangroves by 2024, the largest in the world, with 4 times carbon absorption compared to tropical forests. Indonesia is open to investments and transfers of technology, including for energy transitions. There is also great opportunities in the development of biofuels, lithium battery industry, and electric vehicles. Indonesia's G20 presidency in 2022 will prioritize enhancing cooperation in climate change and sustainable development. Indonesia will continue to support the efforts of our friends in the Pacific. We should continuously advance concrete global partnership instead of attributing blame. Worse so is applying trade barriers under the guise of environmental issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The floor is now to the President of the Republic of South Africa, President Ramaphosa.
Thank you, Your Excellency, President Joe Biden, and Excellencies, and ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to start off by thanking President Biden for convening this Leaders' Summit on climate. We are all so delighted to have the United States back, working with all of us to tackle the global challenge of climate change. Climate change is the most pressing issue of our time. It is a global phenomenon from which developing economies are particularly vulnerable, especially on our African continent. Without effective adaptation, climate change has the potential to reverse the developmental gains in many of the countries on the continent and push millions of people further into poverty and unemployment. In doing so, we have to adhere to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. Poor countries have historically contributed least to global emissions. Developing countries often suffer the most from the devastating effects of climate change, particularly in the form of drought, extreme storms, and rising sea levels, as well as floods. Consequently, developed economies, we hold the view, have a responsibility to support developing economies to enable them to mitigate and adapt to climate change. Significant progress can be made when we all honor our mutual commitments. We therefore need to emphasize the primacy of multilateralism in ensuring the full implementation of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. South Africa is fully committed to enhancing its ambition and accelerating its climate actions. Last year, we finalized our National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy, which coordinates all actions at government level and at national level. We have also adopted a low emissions development strategy in pursuit of a just transition to a low carbon, sustainable and climate resilient developmental pathway. We are currently in the process of updating South Africa's nationally determined contribution. Our new NCD target ranges have been released for public consultation. The new target ranges we are proposing are much more ambitious in two respects. Firstly, the top of the 2030 range has been reduced by 28%, or 174 million metric tons, which is a very significant reduction. Second, according to our previous nationally determined contribution, South Africa's emissions would peak and plateau in 2025 and decline only from 2035. South Africa's emissions will begin to decline from 2025, effectively shifting our emissions decline 10 years earlier. With regard to our energy source, we plan to build capacity to generate over 17 gigabytes of renewable energy by 2030. We remain committed to contributing our fair share to reduce global emissions and to do so in the context of overcoming poverty, inequality, and underdevelopment. The move towards a low-carbon, climate-resilient society cannot happen overnight. We need to work together to create a climate-resilient society, and amongst other things, we should firstly ensure that as we transit to a more climate-resilient future, it must be based on a just transition that ensures that those who are most vulnerable in society do not get left behind. Secondly, it is critical that all three of the goals of the Paris Agreement, this mitigation, adaptation, and finance, should be advanced with equal determination and ambition. Thirdly, we must scale up support in the form of financing, technology, and capacity building. It will not be possible for developing economy countries, including those in Africa, to enhance ambition on either adaptation or mitigation. Fourthly, it is important that aid on climate change should be provided separately and should not be part of conventional development assistance. When it is given in the form of loan financing, the debt burden of developing countries is worsened. We call on developed economies, which historically bear the greatest responsibility for emissions, to meet their responsibilities to developing economies. This will be vital to restoring the bonds of trust between developed and developing economies. As we have done since the time of our revered leader Nelson Mandela, South Africa stands ready to work with other nations to build bridges to find solutions that secure humanity's future. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The floor is now to the President of the Council of Ministers of the Italian Republic, Prime Minister Mario Draghi. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you. I want to begin by thanking President Biden for his leadership in taking this initiative. As Chancellor Merkel just said, it's a complete change. Now, we are confident that together we'll win this challenge. President Biden, dear colleagues, as we fight the pandemic in our countries, we cannot lose sight of the other crises we face. Tackling climate change. In the Paris Agreement, we pledged to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. But the actions we've taken since have proven insufficient. Under current policies, we are set to achieve 3 degrees of global warming. We need to reverse course and do it soon. The fiscal plans we are designing to help our countries recover from the COVID-19 offer a unique opportunity. We can transform our economies and pursue a greener and more inclusive growth model. In Europe, we launched a 750 billion euro joint plan, what we call the Next Generation EU. One of its objectives is to support the environmental transition in Europe and make the EU carbon neutral by 2050. Around 10% of it, roughly 70 billion euros, will go for investment in green infrastructures, circular economy, and sustainable mobility in Italy only. Italy is my own country, is a beautiful but a fragile country. The fight against climate change is a fight for our history, a fight for our landscapes. We need to frame our efforts towards sustainability within an effective and inclusive multilateral approach. Italy holds the presidency of the G20 this year, and the safeguard of our planet is the main objective of our program. G20 countries account for 75% of global emissions. We have a special responsibility in ensuring we deliver on the objectives of the Paris Agreement. The Italian presidency has proposed to hold a joint climate and energy ministerial meeting. A strong resolve by the G20 will also boost the chances for a successful COP26 conference in Glasgow. As the partner of the UK for COP26, Italy is committed to give its contribution by hosting the pre-COP26 in Milan, an event Youth for Climate. International climate finance plays also an important role in achieving these objectives. Italy has committed to use its shareholding in the multilateral development banks to set high targets for climate finance and to ensure their activities are aligned with the Paris Agreement. We look forward to hosting the second edition of the Financing Common Summit of all public development banks as part of the G20 presidency. We must also help the most vulnerable countries. Last December, Italy pledged 30 million euros to the United Nations Adaptation Fund. The climate commitments we make now will determine our chances of tackling climate change effectively in the next decade and beyond. We want to act now, not to regret it later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. We turn now to the President of the Republic of the Marshall Islands, His Excellency David Kavua.
Excellencies, Yagweh, and greetings from the Republic of the Marshall Islands. Thank you, President Biden, for bringing us together. Our actions today have a direct bearing upon the future and security of my nation and for others in the Pacific and beyond. We are a low-lying atoll nation, barely a meter above sea level. For millennia, our people have navigated between our islands to build thriving communities and cultures. Today, we are navigating through the storm of climate change, determined to do our part to steer the world to safety. We know what a safe harbor looks like. The Marshall Islands, with HEOSIS, fought for years to create consensus around a 1.5 degree Celsius temperature goal. In 2015, we brought together the High Ambition Coalition to turn the 1.5 to stay alive, rallying cry into a call shared by all parties to the Paris Agreement. The role of the Act is even more important today to ensure that 1.5 remains in reach. Our key task this year is to ensure that updated national emissions commitments are in line with that goal. NDCs are where ambition moves from promise to plan. Given how far off track the world is today, it is vital that we come together every 5 years to increase ambition. All nations should also be charting long-term net zero strategies and implementation pathways before COP26. Too often, vulnerable countries hear the excuse that steep emission cuts are too costly, but political signals, especially from the major economies, shape decisions on investment and innovation for low-carbon pathways. Now is the moment for this signal to be unequivocal. The recovery from COVID-19 gives us a rare chance to invest in a safer and healthier world. Sector-wide transformation are possible. Together with the Solomon Islands, we are pushing for stronger emission action at the IMO through a carbon levy to fund research and help the most vulnerable. Leading from front lines, we were the first to strengthen our NDCs in 2018, and we have a 2050 net zero strategy paired with an electricity roadmap as our implementation pathway. We recently celebrated the success of the Micronesia Challenge, and we'll be joining the local 2030 Islands Network. But all our actions will not be enough if big emitters fail to act. We feel the effects of climate change now, and so we are also leading the way to on adaptation. We deliver our adaptation communications in 2020 and are developing our national adaptation plan. Adequate and accessible financing is key, and so I support the call for 50% of climate financing to go towards adaptation. I'll conclude by asking my fellow leaders, how will you move from plans to implementation to align with a 1.5-degree future and help others do the same? Your answer will define the future for your children and grandchildren and for mine. Kumol Dada.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. President Biden, we know you have to step away for a few moments. We look forward to having you back here shortly, but any words before you depart?
Well, I apologize for having to leave for a few minutes. I'll be back shortly, but it's an encouraging start. There's a lot to do. I get this feeling that we are really beginning to make some real progress. So I'm looking forward to hearing more.
Thanks, Mr. President. The floor is now to the President of the Argentine Republic, His Excellency Alberto Fernandez. Mr. President.
Muy buenos días desde Buenos Aires, Argentina. Buenos días a todos y a todas.
And from Buenos Aires, Argentina, good morning to all of you. Thank you so much for the invitation given to me by President Biden. Today is the Earth Day, and we have to work together. I am so happy that the U.S. is reinvesting again. Argentina considers the climate change as a key issue, as 50 years ago, General Perón said, we have to be aware of the suicidal path that we are working because of the contamination. It's now or never. In Argentina, we part of the Paris Agreement, and we included in our national cabinet climate change as one of our ministers so that they can set up the mitigation plan that is going to be submitted to the COP26 in Glasgow. Therefore, what we are going to say is which our new commitments are. First, we're going to increase our contribution 27% vis-a-vis the 2016. There are two additional issues of what we submitted in 2016. This is coincides with the objective of 1.5 centigrades and net zero emission. We are committed to develop 30% of our energy network with renewables, and we have a plan, very efficient for the industry, transportation, construction. We will promote the adoption of cutting-edge technologies to reduce methane emissions and contaminants. We will also have a plan to export hydrogen. We will adopt very deep measures to eradicate illegal deforestation, and it will classify it as a crime. We will have a new bill to protect native forests, and we will also promote the rapid law of education regarding environmental issues. We have to work together, and therefore we have to remember what our Pope Francis says. The social and ecological crisis are two faces of the same issue, and they are linked. And as President Macron just said, we need to renew the financial architecture. The agenda is very clear. We have to have soft loans with bilateral and multilateral banks. We have to pay for services and swap of debt for environmental actions. We cannot discriminate those countries that are the medium-sized countries, and we have to make sure that the qualified and the agents that qualify our countries have to be aware of what our realities are and what are the issues that make our countries go into debt, in this case due to the COVID, and we have to have better terms of payment. Therefore, I hope that out of this summit we have a new path. This is a time to dream. I talk to all my colleagues in Latin America and Caribbean. We have to coordinate regional measures, social measures. The new generations are looking at us. We cannot doubt anymore. Nobody can work by himself or herself. We have to work together. We have to have social justice, financial justice, and environmental justice. Thank you very much.
The floor to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen.
Dear President Biden, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, a little over 5 years ago, the world came together to sign the Paris Agreement. Today, we have to strengthen that global unity around ambitious new goals, because this will be the make or break decade for our climate. And therefore, I want to thank President Biden for convening this meeting on Earth Day. The Paris Agreement is humanity's life insurance. And at the COP26 in Glasgow, we must show that we all have understood this and that we are ready for more climate action, because we are getting dangerously close to 1.5 degrees of global warming. Science tells us it's not too late yet, but we must hurry up. And that is what Europe is doing. 11 days after taking office, my Commission launched the European Green Deal for transforming our economy. And yesterday, we agreed Europe's first ever climate law with the European Parliament and our 27 governments, as Angela Merkel mentioned. With this, we write into stone the goal to set out by the European Green Deal to make Europe climate neutral by 2050. And we have also agreed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030. In June, my Commission will table proposals to make Europe fit for 55. We will make emission trading work not only for energy generation and industry, but also for transport and for buildings. Carbon must have its price, because nature cannot pay the price any longer. But Fit for 55 is not just about emissions. We will safeguard our nature and enhance biodiversity, going for nature-based solutions wherever possible. And we will ensure that all this is done in a just and inclusive way. Because for our ambition to succeed, we must leave nobody behind. Climate action is also a massive opportunity for our economies. It creates new markets, it mobilizes investment in new and transforming industries, and it unleashes innovation for a healthier and more prosperous future. And this is why 30% of Europe's recovery plan, Next Generation EU, Mario Draghi mentioned it, altogether 1.8 trillion euro, is earmarked for climate-related goals. The fight against climate change will be the engine for our global recovery. And it will be our compass for cooperation with all of you in many areas, in research, innovation, and breakthrough technologies through forums like Mission Innovation, or in helping vulnerable countries to become resilient to climate change. Europe wants to be the first climate neutral continent in the world, but to save the climate, we need the world. We need all major economies to take their responsibility and to turn the transition into an opportunity for all. Let's set together a new global benchmark for climate neutrality. Let us work together on a shared commitment and joint action for reducing emissions by 2030. This puts us on a pathway to net zero emissions by 2050. And that is what our planet needs. Thank you again, President Biden, for this meeting. It is so good to have the US back on our side in the fight against climate change. Together we can go faster and get further and together we will win the future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I now turn the floor to His Majesty King Salman, custodian of the two holy mosques and king of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Your Majesty.
Your Majesties, Highnesses, and Excellencies, dear participants, in the beginning we would like to thank President Biden for holding this summit to combat climate change, which threatens life on our planet. These challenges recognize no national borders. The objective is sustainable development, and in order to achieve this, there must be a comprehensive methodology that takes into account the different developmental circumstances that exist around the world. In accordance with the Saudi Vision 2030, we have launched packages of strategies and regulations such as the National Environmental Strategy with the aim of producing 50% of the kingdom's energy need by 2030 using clean, renewable sources. Enhancing the level of international cooperation is the optimal solution to meeting the challenges of climate change. During our G20 presidency last year, we advocated the need to adopt the notion of a circular carbon economy, launching 2 international initiatives to curb land degradation and to protect coral reefs. More recently, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince announced 2 new initiatives, the Saudi Green Initiative and the Middle East Green Initiative, which aim at reducing carbon emissions in the region by more than 10% of global contributions. These initiatives also aim at planting 50 billion trees in the region, in addition to a number of unique initiatives. These 2 initiatives have been endorsed by the international community. We will work with our partners to achieve their goals by hosting this year the Green Saudi Initiative Forum and the Middle East Green Initiative Summit. Finally, we would like to affirm our keenness on and commitment to cooperation to combat climate change in order to create a better environment for future generations, wishing success for our efforts to protect our planet, and may peace be with you.
Thank you very much, Your Majesty. The floor is now to the President of the Federal Republic of Brazil, President Bolsonaro. Mr. President.